Today we begin the second chapter of the book Footprints Without Feet, The Thief's Story by Ruskin Bond. Now, thief's story, obviously you can understand what there must be, but really it's actually interesting to, go through that entire story, and of course, the message as always is way more interesting and very effective, way more to learn. So, Ruskin Bond is a famous Indian writer in English. His father was with the Royal Air Force. At the age of 10, Ruskin started living with his grandmother in Dehradun after his father's death in 1944. Now, he was merely 10 years old. He spent 4 years in London, where he started writing his first novel, The Room on the Roof. Ruskin Bond is now recognized as a leading writer in English, particularly known for his short stories, at the same time interesting ones. You will see why I'm saying interesting, because this is one of those interesting stories. Now, let's look at the plot of the chapter. Ruskin Bond is a famous Indian writer. The Thief's Story is one of his well-known stories, pretty well-known. In this story, the writer shows how the reformation of a criminal is best achieved through love and understanding rather than punishment. These two lines tell it all. Yes, I hope you got it, but we will know it in detail as well. Hari Singh is a thief and a cheat. He comes into contact with Anil. Anil gives him work in his house. One day, Hari Singh steals Anil's money and runs away. But the kindness and love of Anil makes him come back and return the money. You think that's possible? Yes, it is. When you visit a prison, if you have heard prisoners talking, obviously you will not go to the prison. But yes, you get to know even in the news and the headlines and stuff that if you tackle these prisoners, see, there are exceptions to every case. I am not saying that every prisoner can, go with the same, but there are certain prisoners who actually you can deal with love. It's not necessary that they need to be punished. Yeah. I was still a thief when I met Anil. And though only 15, I was an experienced and fairly successful hand. Experienced and fairly successful hand as in, remember, he's a thief. So yes, he would successfully rob things and people wouldn't even come to know. So he was very well experienced. He was doing since quite some time. And of course, he was successful at it. Anil was watching a wrestling match when I approached him. He was about 25, a tall, lean fellow, and he looked easygoing, kind and simple enough for my purpose. For my purpose, he wanted to steal him as well. I hadn't had much luck of late and thought I might be able to get into the young man's confidence. Of late, so far he was saying he was successful at robbing. But of late, maybe luck had not favored him. So what he thought was, let me try getting into the confidence of this, tall, lean man, very kind, very simple. I'm sure I can easily cheat him. You look a bit of a wrestler yourself, I said. Now remember, Anil is watching wrestling. So, Hari Singh is telling him, you look so much like a wrestler yourself, I said. A little flattery helps in making friends. Flattery as an insincere praise. Now, remember, he was a tall, lean fellow, thin guy, right? And what is Hari Singh telling him? Just flattering, just telling him, he's praising him falsely. Insincere praise, he's telling him just for the heck of it. It's not even true. So he's telling him, you look like a bit of a wrestler yourself, and he's so lean. So he says, a little of all this actually helps making good, friends. I'm sure you guys do the same, if I'm not to be mistaken. So do you, he replied, which put me off for a moment because at that time I was rather thin. Now, just the way Hari Singh flattered Anil, Anil did the same. He told him, so do you. Which put me off as in caused me to lose interest in something or someone. He suddenly what is he talking? It's not. I'm already so thin, because at that time I was very thin. So how can he call me a wrestler? My, sort of mood went off and I lost interest. Well, I said modestly, without boasting, in a very humble manner, I said modestly, I do wrestle a bit. He just said it, okay, even I wrestle a bit. So Anil is asking him, what's your name? Hari Singh. I lied. I took a new name every month that kept me ahead of the police and my former employers. So every month, Hari Singh, must be something, kept changing his name. Why? So that the police does not get in touch with him. Yes, they don't trace him easily. And even the former employers as in where he must have worked even before. Now, just like he's trying to get Anil into confidence, likewise, there must have been many more like Anil before. So he kept changing. So even if he has cheated those people will look for that name, the name that was given to them. Right? Right now, it's Hari Singh. So if anyone asks Anil who is working, it's a Hari Singh. And person A will say, oh yeah, my guy's name was Ramu. So it will be different. After this introduction, Anil talked about the well-oiled wrestlers who were grunting, lifting and throwing each other about. Now, after that introduction, after they introduced each other, he spoke about those wrestlers. You've seen the wrestlers, they are so well-oiled and they keep grunting. They make that voice, making low guttural sounds, and they keep, throwing each other, lifting each other. I didn't have much to say. Anil walked away. I followed casually. Hello again, he said. I kept following him. I just walked behind him. Hello again, he said. I gave him my most appealing smile, the most attractive smile. I want to work for you, I said. He directly approached him. He told him, I want to work for you, but I can't pay you. I thought that over for a minute. Anil told him, look, if you're trying to even work for me, I don't have that much money that I can pay you. So Hari Singh gives it a thought. He's like, he's going to him for money, and if he says, I cannot pay you, what sense it makes? Perhaps I had misjudged my man. So he had miscalculated that maybe this guy is equally rich, he can rob him, he can take money from him, and there that guy tells him, I cannot even pay you. I asked, can you feed me? He says, okay, don't pay me, but can you feed me some food? What did Anil ask him? Can you cook? So what does that show? Anil cannot cook. So can you cook? I can cook. I lied again. So you see the number of lies he's speaking to Hari Singh. Please keep track of them. If you can cook, then maybe I can feed you. He says, look, if you can cook, then I can feed you. He took me to his room over the Jamna sweet shop and told me I could sleep on the balcony. He asked me to sleep there. But the meal I cooked that night must have been terrible because Anil gave it to a stray dog and told me to be off. Now, you remember, Hari Singh did not know to cook. He had lied to him that, yes, I can cook. So, that night when actually Hari Singh really cooked, Anil could not eat it because he had never cooked before. So, he was a bad cook. And obviously, what he cooked was not tasty. So, Anil gave it to the stray dog, the dogs on the road. And he just asked me to be off. But I just hung around. He told me you can just leave, because he had lied to him. But I just hung around, as in I spent a lot of time in a specific place or with specific people. I was just around there, smiling in my most appealing way. He was still giving that most attractive smile. And he couldn't help laughing. Anil kept seeing him and he just laughed it out. Later, he patted me on the head and said, never mind, he'd teach me to cook. He says, okay, don't worry, I'll teach you to cook. Finally, he just took pity on him. He had mercy on him and he says, okay, fine, come. He also taught me to write my name. Now, just imagine how good a person Anil was. Yeah, he even taught him to write his name and said he would soon teach me to write whole sentences and to add numbers. Now, what is Anil doing? He's trying to make him really good. He's trying to actually make him do things which will help him to stand on his feet. So he says, don't worry, you've learnt your name. I'll make you write, a few sentences, the whole sentences, and also I will teach you how to add numbers. I was grateful. He was so thankful. I knew that once I could write like an educated man, there would be no limit to what I could achieve. He says, once I could write like an educated man, he said, once I learn, he teaches me and I get educated enough, I know I can earn a lot of money. There would be no limit to what I could achieve. It was quite pleasant working for Anil. Anil himself was such a cool man, so Hari Singh had no issues. I made the tea in the morning and then would take my time buying the day's supplies, usually making a profit of about ₹1 a day. Now, how he used to go and buy supplies. So how would he make a profit? Well, obviously, it's a very obvious thing. He would cheat Anil. So if he spent 10, he would say, I spent 11. So he would make that one extra buck for himself. I think he knew I made a little money this way, but he did not seem to mind. He says, somewhere I felt Anil was aware that I'm cheating him by, I'm taking more money from him, but he was okay. He never said anything. Anil made money by fits and starts. How did Anil earn? He made it intermittently or occasionally. He was not, there was no regular income. Occasionally at intervals he would get the money. It was not a very regular basis. It was not a fixed income. He would borrow 1 week and lend the next. He kept worrying about his next check. But as soon as it arrived, he would go out and celebrate. Now, how was he actually, earning? What he would do is, he would borrow 1 week, right? Supposing he borrowed 10 rupees and then he would earn 20 rupees and then he would lend it the next week to somebody else. He kept worrying about his next check, when he would get his next payment. But as soon as he would get it, he would enjoy. He would celebrate that. It seems he wrote for magazines, a cure way to make a living. He says he would write for magazines. So obviously, magazines, nowadays we do write it regularly. You can, keep doing it so often. But maybe at that time that was not so regular. So whenever he wrote, he earned the money. He got the money. But yeah, that was a very strange way to make a living, according to Hari Singh. One evening he came home with a small bundle of notes, saying he had just sold a book to a publisher. At night, I saw him tuck the money under the mattress. Now, one fine day, Anil sold a book to a publisher, so he got a good amount of money. Now, what he did was, he came home with the money and of course, Hari Singh saw it. At night, what did Anil do? He saw him tuck the money under the mattress. The mattress, where you sleep, on which you sleep. So, under that, he tucked it. He kept it there. I had been working for Anil for almost a month, and apart from cheating on the shopping, had not done anything in my line of work. He says, I was there for a month. It was a month by then that I had been working for him. And apart from cheating him in the shopping, which that 1 rupee he would make a day, apart from that, he had done no wrong. He had done nothing in the line of work, in his line of work. What was his line of work? Robbing. So in that, he had done nothing apart from that rupee a day. I had every opportunity for doing so. He says things were very open. Everything was in front of me. In fact, Anil had given me a key to the door and I could come and go as I pleased. I could have easily robbed him. I had the key to me. Whenever I wanted, I could come. Whenever I wanted, I could leave. He was the most trusting person I had ever met. He says, first time I came across such a person who trusted me, who could be, worth trusting. He was such a man. And that is why it was so difficult to rob him. Now you see, some people actually are so good. They are born with golden hearts. Anil is one of them. But now you see how Hari Singh is being reformed. So, he said it was not difficult to rob him. In fact, because he was so trustworthy, because he started trusting me so much, it became difficult for me to rob him. It's easy to rob a greedy man because he can afford to be robbed. But it's difficult to rob a careless man Sometimes he doesn't even notice he's been robbed, and that takes all the pleasure out of the work. Now, how he's explaining, he says, see, because Anil is such a careless person, he wouldn't even realize that I have robbed his money. He wouldn't even come to know. Now, just because he will not come to know, Hari Singh says there's no pleasure in doing that. I would rather rob a greedy man, because that's worth robbing. He does not want to part with his money. He wants more and more and more. And if I take that more from him, that will hurt him and that will give me pleasure as a robber. Yeah, so that's worth doing. Well, it's time I did some real work. I told myself. What is the real work? His original robbing. I'm out of practice. He hasn't stolen since long. So he says, I'm out of practice. And if I don't take the money, he'll only waste it on his friends. He says, moreover, so if I don't take that money from there, if I don't steal it, then what he'll do is he will just go and enjoy and waste it on his friends. After all, he doesn't even pay me. He says he doesn't even pay me. So what will he do with that money? He just feeds me. He does not pay me money. Anil was asleep. A beam of moonlight stepped over the balcony and fell on the bed. You could see the moonlight coming right there into the house. It was over the balcony and it fell on the bed. I sat up on the floor considering the situation. Now I got up to see, okay, now it's time for me to steal the money. If I took the money, I could catch the 10:30 express to Lucknow. He says I would take the money and immediately what would be my next thing? To rush to the station and catch the express to Lucknow at 10:30. Slipping out of the blanket very quickly, I moved out of the blanket. I crept up to the bed. Anil was sleeping peacefully. His face was clear and unlined. His face was he was having a nice peaceful sleep. There were no lines. Why? What do you mean by lines? Showing no sign of worry or anxiety. Anil was such a calm character. There was nothing worrying him, nothing bothering him. He said, in fact, even I had more marks on my face, though mine were mostly scars. He says he was so peaceful. In fact, mine had way more than his. Of course, he had those marks on the face. There were scars. He said there were no lines also. Generally when you sleep, you have these lines. It was not the case. My hand slid under the mattress, searching for the notes. Now, very slowly, he put his hand under the mattress, trying to look where the notes are. When I found them, I drew them out without a sound. I very quietly pulled them out. Anil sighed in his sleep and turned on his side. He just did that and he turned. He slept in the other direction. In which direction? Where Hari Singh was standing, towards me. I was startled. I was like, oh God. And quickly crawled out of the room and hurriedly I moved away from there. When I was on the road, I began to run. Now he's taken the money and where is he heading? Yes, to the station to get the 10:30 express to Lucknow. I ran. I had the notes at my waist, held there by the string of my pajamas. Now it was night time, so he was in his pajamas. So where were the notes? They were on his waist and they were there with the support of the string of the pajamas. I slowed down to a walk and counted the notes. He ran, then gradually he slowed down. And after he slowed down, then he started walking. And while he was walking, he started counting the money. 600 rupees in 50s. So what was the currency, the dimension, of the currency? It was 50 rupee notes and they were 600. I could live like an oil-rich Arab for a week or two. Well, in those days, 600 was way more, it was a lot of money. And he says, oh my God, with this money, I can live like an oil-rich Arab. Arabs are rich because of the oil. Yeah. So oil-rich Arab for a week or two. 2 weeks, I can live a lavish life. No problem. Now that I have this money with me. When I reached the station, I did not stop at the ticket office. I had never bought a ticket in my life, but dashed straight to the platform. He says, as soon as I reached the platform, I never waited at the ticket counter. Why? Because he had never bought a ticket in his life. He had traveled without a ticket. So he directly, dashed, he ran straight towards the platform. The Lucknow Express was just moving out. It had just started, it was leaving the platform. The train had still to pick up speed. When the train first starts, it doesn't immediately start fast. It starts very slow, and then it becomes faster. So it had still to pick up speed, and I should have been able to jump into one of the carriages. He's saying it was that slow, I could have easily got into one of the compartments. Anyhow, I could have jumped. But I hesitated. Now is the climax. Now watch attentively. But I hesitated. For some reason I can't explain. And I lost the chance to get away. He says, I could have done it. I could have got into the compartment. But I hesitated. I don't know why. I was not sure. It was, should I, shouldn't I, that type. I was hesitating. And while that was going on, obviously the train picked up speed and it was gone. And I did not have any chance to get on it now. So that chance was gone. When the train had gone, I found myself standing alone on the deserted platform. Deserted as in it was empty. There was nobody on the platform. Once the train left, there was absolutely, remember it is 10:30 in the night. So there was nobody. He was there by himself. He was all alone. I had no idea where to spend the night. Now remember, he has left Anil's house. Now he has stolen the money. So obviously he couldn't go back there, right? Unless he wanted to be a very good person, but who knows? So I had no idea where to spend the night. I had no friends, believing that friends were more trouble than help. He says, I never had any friend. Why? Because that was his belief, that the friends were more trouble than help. The friends would cause more trouble rather than helping. I did not want to make anyone curious by staying at one of the small hotels near the station. Now, if I would have stayed anywhere near the station, people would have wondered, people would have asked questions. So I didn't want to do that either. The only person I knew very well was the man I had robbed. Yes. Now, where is he planning to go? He is only thinking of Anil. He says, now that man is the only one I know and I have robbed him. Leaving the station, I walked slowly through the bazaar. In my short career as a thief, I had made a study of men's faces when they had lost their goods. Now this career as a thief, how much ever time he had done that, he had done one observation. And what was that observation? That he made a study of the men's faces when they lost something, how their faces would be. So the greedy man showed fear, the rich man showed anger, the poor man showed acceptance. But I knew that Anil's face, when he discovered the theft, when he discovers that I have stolen the money, would show only a touch of sadness. That's it. And that also not for the money, not for the loss of money, but for the loss of trust. Now in this career, he realized, he says, if I would have robbed, when I rob a greedy man, I know he shows fear. Rich man gets angry. Poor man says, oh God, it's gone. What can I do? That's how they do. But when it comes to Anil, he says, how he would react when he comes to know, he would show a little bit of sadness. Obviously now his money is gone. Hard-earned money he used to write. Yeah. If he loses that money when he comes to know about it, he will be sad, but he will not be sad for the money that's gone. He will be sad because he trusted Hari Singh. That Hari Singh broke his trust. That is why he would be sad. I found myself in the Maidan and sat down on a bench. An open space. I went and sat down there on a bench. The night was chilly. It was cold. It was early November and a light drizzle added to my discomfort. Now, it was cold already. It was chilly. I was feeling cold. On top of it, it started drizzling. There was a light shower, and that made me all the more uncomfortable. Soon it was raining quite heavily. My shirt and pajamas stuck to my skin. Why were they stuck? Because they were wet, obviously. And a cold wind blew the rain across my face. As it is, it was so cold. Moreover, I was wet, and then this cold breeze, running from my, just hitting my face, it blew the rain across my face. I went back to the bazaar and sat down in the shelter of the clock tower. Now, he's slowly heading back towards Anil's house. So, he lands up at the bazaar, and then he sits in the shelter of the clock tower. The clock showed midnight. Now, remember, 10:30 he was at the station. He missed the train. Now he started heading back towards towards Anil's house. Now it is midnight. It is 12 already. I felt for the notes. They were damp from the rain. He tried touching those notes which, they were there with the support of the string of his pajamas. He took them, and then obviously they were equally wet because of the rain. Anil's money. In the morning, he would probably have given me 2 or 3 rupees to go to the cinema. But now I had it all. He says now maybe, in the morning, now because he's earned so much, maybe he might give me 2 to 3 rupees, to go and watch cinema. I mean, what more than that can he do? But currently I have it all. I have the entire 600 rupees. I couldn't cook his meals, run to the bazaar, or learn to write whole sentences anymore. He says, now that I have robbed, now that I have left his house, what is the loss I am going to face? What are, the things that I'm going to miss? I'm not going to be able to cook for him. I'm not going to run to the bazaar. Nor am I going to learn to write the whole sentences. Remember, Anil had promised him that I will teach you that as well as to add numbers. So now he's calculating what all is he not going to get. He got the 600. But instead of this, in the bargain, what is he losing? He is losing much more. I had forgotten about them in the excitement of the theft. He said, I did not realize that I am going to miss all this as well. I'll get the 600. But then what? How long will the 600 survive? And if I learn to read and write, I can make way more money for a longer time. Whole sentences I knew could one day bring me more than a few hundred rupees. He says, obviously, it's going to fetch me a lot of money. It was a simple matter to steal, and sometimes just as simple to be caught. He says, it's a very simple thing to steal. Equally, maybe even if you're caught, it's over. But to be a really big man, a clever and respected man, was something else. He says, obviously now, being a big man, people who will respect you, people who will admire you, for such people, for such things, it's way more than anything. It's way more than 600 rupees. This is much more, this is way more long lasting. It is more of the long run. I should go back to Anil, I told myself, if only to learn to read and write. He says, I think I've made a blunder. I should have been with him if for nothing else. Of course, he didn't have any attachment with that fellow. But yes, he wanted to read and write. He says, at least he will teach me to read and write. I will become something in life. I will become much more richer. I hurried back to the room feeling very nervous. For it is much easier to steal something than to return it undetected. Now, he made up his mind now that I definitely want to go back to him. So, he hurried back to the room, but he was extremely nervous. He was totally uncomfortable. He was at discomfort. Why? Because it is way easier to steal money. But to go and return that, and that too undetected, way difficult. And you need a lot of guts for it. I opened the door quietly, then stood in the doorway in clouded moonlight. He says, very slowly I opened the door. Then I slowly stepped in the doorway and in the clouded moonlight. Anil was still asleep. Anil was fast asleep. I crept to the head of the bed. I slowly went to the head of the bed and my hand came up with the notes. I took the money. I felt his breath on my hand. Now remember, he was sleeping here. This was the mattress. So he had to keep the money there. So he could feel his breath. You know, I remained still for a minute. I was like, I kept the money and I didn't move at all. Then my hand found the edge of the mattress and slipped under it with the notes. Very quickly, then again, I kept it back. I awoke late next morning. Now, with all this stress, with all this thing, he got up late in the morning to find that Anil had already made the tea. Generally, it was Hari Singh who would make the tea for him, but because he was fast asleep, Anil did the honors. He stretched out his hand towards me. There was a 50 rupee note between his fingers. My heart sank. I thought I had been discovered. Now, you know, he was full of guilt. He had that guilty feeling. So when he gave him that 50 rupee note, you know, when Anil came in front of him and gave it to him, he was like, I'm gone. He's got to know everything. I made some money yesterday, he explained. Now, you'll be paid regularly. My spirits rose. But when I took the note, I saw it was still wet from the night's rain. Just imagine his condition at that point of time. He's telling him, Anil is telling him, he's sort of playing innocent, like he knows nothing. He says, you know what, I made some money yesterday. I earned some money. So now what? Now I am in that position where I can pay you regularly. First, he was not paying him. He says, now I can afford to pay you because I've earned that money. My spirits rose. He's saying, wow, I was happy. I'm going to get money regularly. But when he took the note in his hand, what did he get to know? What did he realize rather? That money was still wet. Why? Because of the night's rain. Today we'll start writing sentences, he said. Exactly what Hari Singh wanted. Exactly why he had come back to him. He knew. Anil knew it all. But neither his lips nor his eyes showed anything. Just imagine, now you see how he's actually doing it with trust and love. He is actually reforming Hari Singh into a good man. He is actually making him move away from his profession, which he originally was doing. So he says he knew it, but he never showed it through his eyes. He never spoke a word. Neither his lips nor his eyes said anything. I smiled at Anil in my most appealing way. You remember initially he wanted to work with him, so twice he had done that. He had given him that most attractive smile. Right now, what was the difference? Just tell me. Right now, when, Anil offered him all this and he told him that, we will start sentences today, I smiled at Anil in my most appealing way and understand the sentence. And the smile came by itself without any effort. This time, it was actually an original smile. He did not have to put an effort to smile. Previously, when he was trying to cheat him, when he was trying to lie to him, that is the time he had put up an effort and put up an attractive smile. It was a fake smile. This had come from the heart. Why? Because Anil trusted him yet. Yet Anil trusted him, and yet he was ready to help him out. He was ready to teach him just the way he had promised. My dear friends, you will rarely come across such people. It's really difficult, but at the same time, when you come across such people, oh, please, please maintain good relations with them. It's really worth it. Just remember this line. Reformation, like education, is a journey, not a destination. Yes, you change. Education also changes you. Reform yourself. Change yourself for the better. But remember, Mary Harris Jones has said it, that it is a journey. It is not a destination. You don't stop there. That's not where you belong or you need to stop. You have to keep moving further on. That's not It's just a pause. It's not a full stop. So keep moving exactly the way you are going to move to your next chapter. For the same, keep watching and keep learning.